Here's the thing. If you rarely get friction on pricing, if it's rarely a barrier to entry, then it's probably not as bad, right? If not at least 20% of your deals in the negotiation stage give you some kind of friction on pricing, then you're probably charging way too little. Let's say 40% keeps giving you pushback, then of course you might want to go down. And at that stage, they've already invested time, so they'll always also be honest about, are you simply too expensive and therefore I'm not buying your solution? Or is there a different reason? And you can just straight up ask someone, right? Like, why didn't you buy? And if they don't give the reason of price, then you probably don't have a pricing problem.
Welcome to the Practical Founders Podcast, where every week we hear an amazing story from a serious founder who built a valuable software company and did it without big funding. I'm your host, Greg Head, and this week my guest is TJ Joosten in Europe, who is a SaaS pricing consultant, has been doing it for over 200 companies in Europe and North America and around the world. And he's one of the few that I've met that works with early stage companies under $1 million ARR, million to 5 million to 10 million. He's not working in very large companies where it's mostly a political problem to solve pricing. There is so much opportunity to price and package your solution better, no matter what your software company is. And the world is changing a little bit with AI and usage-based pricing. We talk about all of that today. He's a very practical and very wise advisor and consultant to practical founders and investors who buy companies as well. So you can make the most of your pricing and packaging, which of course is just like raising funding. It's even better and the most healthy way to grow your business. It's a great discussion with TJ Joosten. Hi, TJ. Welcome to the Practical Founders Podcast.
Hey, Greg, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, we met last month and had plenty of really interesting conversations about SaaS pricing and where things are changing, where things are going at the SaaS conference plus AI in Austin.
Yeah.
You had traveled there from your home in the Netherlands there. Are you in Amsterdam today?
I'm back in Amsterdam, but absolute pleasure being in Austin. Had a lot of fun and was also quite a lot of insights from the event.
Did you learn some things about the modern pricing game, what's working and what's not? I know you're working with a lot of companies. Are there new tricks you can pick up at a conference like that?
Maybe not new tricks, but it's always, there's a lot of noise on LinkedIn, right? And cutting through that. And
Yes.
I think on LinkedIn, everyone's about being the wins and, hey, this is how I'm doing with AI, this and that. And I think on these events, I just like to cut through to the BS and actually say, hey guys, how are you actually doing versus
Yes.
what are you
Yes.
posting on LinkedIn? So that's always nice, yeah.
That's right. Very practical, of course, and as the Dutch would be, just like our practical founders
I
here.
cannot help it. It's the culture.
I get it. That's great. So I look forward to our conversation about pricing in the
Likewise.
changing SaaS world, the hybrid with AI or the AI first world. Let's just start with, you help companies, software companies with pricing. You help VCs and private equity with their companies with pricing as well. Why don't you just give a little of your background, what you're doing now and who you serve and how that works?
So maybe just before Refixer, I was working in SaaS myself for about a decade, usually commercially responsible at startups, early stage from 0 to 5 million. I've done a lot of finding the first couple customers, finding product market fit. And I think during that phase, it's every big customer, like everything you have in terms of pricing, is just straight out the window and seeing, hey,
Yes.
how can I optimize this? First to land it, but then also to make sure I don't go too cheap and I have the mechanics to expand it over time, right? And if you do that for 10 years at various companies and you do it at, like, let's say $100 deals all the way to a couple million in government deals, then you really start to see the pricing principles, how they scale. And then a couple of years ago, I met my co-founder, Anwar El-Haji, who was already in the space with his other company, Availings, but he was doing B2C pricing. So what you see in the supermarket, more about like how high do you go?
Mm-hmm.
And then we both acknowledge, well, me from first principles by being boots on the ground, but him also as an entrepreneur buying software every now and then. We both agreed that B2B pricing just was way more complicated and there was no playbook. If you go to university right now, there's plenty on B2C pricing how to do it. But in
Oh,
B2B
right.
pricing, there's very limited knowledge and a playbook. So we said, okay, let's try and fix that. And we've been doing this a couple of years, both like you said, right, with private equity, VC, but also with entrepreneurs directly. We started with startups just starting out. Okay, how do you actually build a business case? How do you price it? It was a bit more abstract on the go. But then after a couple of years, right, we really had our playbook, our methodology on how to do this. So we've been going up market, and lately we've been working with companies anywhere between 2 and 20 million AR, but all the way
Uh-huh.
also companies doing billions in revenue, and we help them optimize their pricing and packaging strategy. So making more revenue from the same solution essentially.
We got right into it about pricing in our conversation at SaaS Talk. And what is interesting, I think, about your background is you were an operator on the front lines.
Yeah,
And most pricing people work with those 20 million ARR plus
yeah,
software companies where pricing is mostly a complex puzzle and very political. You have investors and senior teams and
yeah,
fiefdoms and founders, and it's, and communication and partner systems and go to market. There's a different game, I would say. It's important up there. It's not as political like the 1 million
yeah,
SaaS company that says we made a mess, right? We're starting to figure it out. We're leaning into a product market fit 1.0. We think it's these customers that want these things. And then 5 million is different, 10 million is different.
100%. Yeah.
And you understand the differences between those phases. That's where most of this audience is. And in my Practical Founders peer groups, almost everybody's below 20 million in ARR. And everybody's moving with their SaaS pricing either in the traditional way or adding AI elements to it. So when you say you work with venture capital firms and private equity firms, VC and PE, are you coming in and they're saying, please help us with this company? Go talk to that company. I know there's a pricing problem. We don't have the expertise to do that. Can you help them fix their pricing challenges?
Yes, I mean, the only difference from what you said and reality is that they don't like to say we don't have the expertise. But
Ah, right. They
but
don't admit. Yes,
the-
right.
I know I'm partially joking. A lot of them say, but we also work with a lot of private equities that definitely acknowledge, hey, we could do better here. But it's exactly like you say. Usually, in the first 2 years after buying a company, especially, when the founder is still there during his earnout period, they will say, hey, we just bought this company either last month or 6 months ago. We think there's an arbitrage, right?
Yes.
And usually there is because founders have a
Yes.
lot of loyalty towards the customer, and the private equity comes in with fresh eyes and say, "Hey,
Every SaaS founder listening
yes,
understands this, right? We started smaller and we have friendly. We're really grateful to our first customers.
as you should, right?"
I
But
know them. They take it personally,
yeah,
all that.
exactly. And the private equity doesn't come in with this emotional baggage. Maybe baggage is the wrong word, but at least they look at it with fresh eyes and they say, technically, what would happen if we would just double the price or triple the price? What would happen as an exercise? And even that intellectual exercise, just that question, is usually already one that most founders wouldn't ask themselves, and the private equity has no problem asking this question. And then, so what we do is we actually figure out, okay, what is the potential here, right? Like how much money is left on the table, and then of course, how do we get there? And the interesting part when we work with private equity, especially during the earnout period of whether the original CEO or founder is still there, we now have to balance the loyalties of the existing CEO or founder with the ambitions of the private equity.
Yeah.
Whereas, of course, if the private equity is in full control with the new CEO, we
Yeah.
can go as fast as the private equity wants to
Well, just
go.
a
But
little politics to manage. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
there's definitely
Yeah.
some politics, yeah, where we try to go to a place where we don't go too far. The entrepreneur can still sell it right and is still confident. At the same time, we want to be more ambitious than the entrepreneur would propose themselves for sure.
Right. So, well, we'll get into some questions here. I know you talk about this as the monetization gap on your Substack, where you write about this called Money on the Table, your
Yeah,
Substack. And it's part of the PE playbook. We buy a company, we're going to raise prices. We don't know exactly how, but we're going to raise prices, which is like raising money, or like if they use debt, like you can just pay off the debt by raising your prices 20%,
yeah,
And and which probably raise your revenue 15% or some version of that, whatever the elasticity is. Can you talk about the monetization gap? I mean, we're talking to founders like, why don't founders do this to ourselves in a healthy way so we can have more margin, more profit? It's like literally like funding
It is, yes.
for the business. And there's probably a monetization gap. You want to just talk about the monetization gap?
Sure, and I mean, I will try and summarize it because I could talk about this for hours,
Of
but
course, that's what pricing people do. It's very, yeah.
but we like to talk. Well, salespeople as well. But the idea is that over time, the value you capture versus the value you create, there's going to be a growing gap in between. And eventually, the bigger it gets, the harder it is to close the gap again. And eventually, when you go to a public market, right, or you sell the company, whatever way you exit, someone else is to profit of that because they don't have the same loyalties. And the idea is early on, when you start with your company, you're selling a future vision, right? So you don't actually have the product ready yet. So you're selling
Yes.
a vision, and for sure in that phase, until you have something, you're asking more money, usually as a B2B solution, than you are delivering in value. And
It's called begging, it's first customers, all that early
yes,
market mess. Yeah,
yeah.
startup mess.
And over time, you deliver actually the
Yeah.
value you originally promised, and you're gonna
Oh.
cross that, right? But that is a moment you cannot point to. It's not the moment. There's not some day where you wake up and you say, "Hey, I think today I delivered on." No. You keep building, you keep building, you keep building, and eventually you realize, "Hey, I think we now have double. We create double the value than we originally sold those customers on." And
Yeah.
the problem with that is when you realize that, you are very unlikely to simply double the price. You're
Ah,
gonna probably say maybe then it's time to do something with the price and increase it by 20%.
mm,
And every time you go up market, there's a similar moment where you realize, hey, originally it was simply because you just built way more and you're gonna keep doing that,
yeah.
but eventually you're also gonna entertain bigger customers. But you almost inevitably always are less ambitious with increasing those prices versus the value you create. So over time,
Mhm.
it's just gonna widen and widen.
Yeah.
That's what the monetization gap is about. And the eventual path or the ending is almost always that someone other than the founding team is gonna profit of that monetization gap.
Right. Their gift when you sell your company majority, minority, whatever it is, to private equity
Yeah,
or somebody else who looks at it and, calibrates the value and the current price and
yeah,
so forth here. So, very common. We talk about pricing in almost every of one of my practical founder peer groups every month. There's all kinds of smaller issues and bigger ones. I can say that generally 90% of founders that I know in the groups and otherwise procrastinate price increases.
if they can, they will. Yeah,
Yeah, they're gonna procrastinate. I don't want to, competitive, what if they don't do it, all that stuff. So and then 90% of them, they do it and nobody complained, right? So there's exceptions to all of
of
that, but,
course.
I totally see that. It's one of the Playbook challenges, for founders. They can leverage what somebody else might do. Like, what would somebody else do if they were running my business? That would be one of the answers is, and that's a simple answer, which is raise prices, right? That's
The
that's
answer
a
is more
simple.
simple than the way to do it. Yeah, but
Yes, that's
yeah,
correct. So, is any of that changing? It's obvious that SaaS is changing, right?
yeah.
There's SaaS budgets are changing and AI perception is changing and AI tools potentially competing. We're in the early innings of all of that. So some founders say, I'm facing headwinds in the market. My competitors are talking about AI. It's harder for me to sell. Things are slowing down. I don't want to raise prices right now
Yeah.
against the headwinds. Do you hear that?
It's a new version of I don't want to call it an excuse, but maybe I should. It's a new
That's
version
good.
of a existing excuse, right? Because I think we will always find a reason not to today,
There you go. Thank you
and
for
we'll do it
pointing that
tomorrow.
out.
I don't have a glass ball. I cannot look into the future. I don't know exactly what will happen, but one thing I can share from our experience, till today, we haven't had a single project where the answer was that we should lower prices. And it's not because we refuse to. If we do the math and we can see, hey, that the price sensitivity or elasticity is in a way that you would actually be growing faster if we were to lower prices. We would.
Yeah.
But in B2B, we have seen till today that there's almost always a stretch in what you can do with prices. And I know AI it feels like a major threat, but I see two things happening. Either someone comes by, vibe codes your solution and completely replaces you. That means you don't really have a strategic mode, right? You didn't have the
Yeah.
relationship with your
Pricing wasn't
customers.
the problem. It's something else. Yeah. Right.
Exactly, or something else. Or we see that people can actually embrace the fact that there's a lot more vibe coded tools coming. And we can even more easily say, no. You can either buy a cheap solution, like as if everything else in life, right? There's always a cheaper solution. Or you
Mhm.
can buy from a party that rather than is just a coding or programming party, you can actually buy from a business that knows and understands the problem more than anyone else. So it's more about, are you just looking for code? Or are you looking for a company that knows its stuff, has the expertise, and if anything happens, we are here to service you? And if you embrace that last part, and if you're a company like that, you can always, like, there's always room to improve your price.
So how many companies have you and your partner worked with on pricing in the software
Over
space?
the years, it has to be at least 100 companies, probably
Yeah.
200.
Yeah.
If you look at per year, we do a couple dozen per year. And the interesting
Okay.
part here is we do it with just the two of us. We do have people in the background in case like operations, finance, etc., all those things. But we've been able to automate a lot of things ourselves as well.
Yeah, of
So
course.
I personally think the tech-enabled agency, we will see some SaaS companies go there as well, where it's more about,
Mhm.
hey, we
Yeah.
sell a
Uh-huh.
solution integrated with services.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I will see more agencies go that path as well, where we actually see them coming to each other.
Yeah, we'll get into that one. That's a really interesting topic because services used to be a problem for venture investors and even private equity. But now it's a moat protector. It's the whole solution.
Yeah.
And it's tech enabled and AI enabled. And it's kind of what people want. And we're kind of revealing they just want the thing done. Can you just do it? Right. As opposed to make me do it. So great. So you're in Europe. Are you working with mostly European companies and investors or are you all over?
Um, we are simply because our network is here, but we work
Yeah.
with companies across the world, both in like Europe, Africa, the US, some in Asia. Even I'd say that's the hardest ones.
Yeah.
And then still, I'd say about 40%, 30, yeah, 30 to 40% in the Netherlands, a lot in the Nordics. We have some we have got a few of Spanish customers as well,
Yeah.
interestingly enough. But yeah, all over the world.
Okay. Are there any differences you could say? I mean, humans are humans and software is software, but
Yeah,
cultures are different and
100%. Yeah,
maturity is different in markets. I'm old enough to remember that when Europe was just starting to buy software, right? And by the
yeah,
way, the Dutch and the British were the first to buy CRM on the continent. The French and the Italian were like, we just have lunch with our customers when we sell them. We don't really use computers. But there used to be a lot of differences, currency differences, culture differences, and you would have wildly different pricing. Is there something different between European pricing and North American pricing? It's a global economy now, but like,
yeah.
is there anything there?
It's funny how you phrase the question. If there's a difference between US and Europe, I think the differences are bigger inside of Europe
Ah,
than
okay.
in Europe versus the US. So the US, to a lot of European companies, I would just say raise your prices by an X amount, and then it's already going to be easier. The main difference is in churn rates, loyalty, and customer acquisition cost, and you have to, of course, embed that in your pricing. So in many ways, it's simply increasing the prices, and we do see more maturity with procurement in the US. So there is more room to
Yes.
be creative with usage-based, outcome-based, for sure.
Yeah.
That
Okay.
said, I would say that the Netherlands, or let's say Benelux, UK, and the Nordics are very much alike in terms of the
Ah, okay.
maturity. They're slowly behind, but like
Yeah.
very alike. But when we go more south, Italy, Spain, etc., then we see when we talk about usage based and outcomes based, it would just blow the minds of some of the companies, and they say they simply don't buy like this, and we don't accept that as an answer. We will always say, "Have you tried?" Right?
Yeah.
We want to validate stuff. We never assume anything to be the truth. We'll make assumptions, but we always validate those. But I would say, like, actually, in those countries, we have a bigger cultural difference than US and Europe. But again, like, so US, increase your prices, go to Europe, you might expect less of the price points, right? But then again, the personnel, right? Salespeople in Europe are also cheaper than in the US.
This podcast is sponsored by Fullscale. Fullscale gives you dedicated senior engineers in the Philippines who are vetted, employed, and supported by Fullscale. They integrate directly with your team so you can move fast and scale in days, not months. They have over 300 active engineers with a 95% retention rate who are trusted by companies across SaaS, fintech, healthcare, and enterprise. Fullscale founder Matt Watson joined us twice on this podcast to talk about his previous practical SaaS founder exits and how AI is changing product development right now. Head to fullscale.io/product-driven for a free copy of his best-selling book, Product Driven, with practical strategies to stop wasting dev cycles and build products customers actually love. Now back to the show. Yeah, pricing is not just what will the market or the next customer will bear. It has to do with the economics of your business. And across Europe, there's more it's common currency now, but there's more variation in business models and economics across the continent there. I totally understand
I
that.
think the main problem most European countries have is when they grow and they have to go to a different country. It actually, like, even in the EU, it does feel like a different country. And the US
Yeah.
still has the benefit, right, of having one integrated market.
Yes, oh, that's a big deal. And of course, European companies coming to North America and, vice versa. There's more of that going on there, but still a challenge to be dealt with there. What changes are you seeing in private equity this year? They consume, even in Europe, it's very common. Most software companies get acquired majority by private equity versus
Yeah.
big strategic. They're just more of that. More practical overall, more practical companies, more practical buyers, all that. Are private equity still active? Are they changing their minds? Are they saying, we're worried now about covering our debt or whatever they're trying to cover?
In my experience, and I don't work with every single private equity, right? But the companies we work with, and I was recently in London for a private equity event, I don't see them slowing down.
Okay, there we go.
But they are looking, of course, to de-risk everything, right? With AI, not every software company is as interesting. And
Yeah.
for sure, the idea that maybe there was always a pipe dream, right? But like the idea of 100% recurring revenue, that is no longer a necessity. Just because of the things I
Oh,
said,
right.
right? Like,
Yeah.
like if it's just the code you're selling, someone else can do it. If it's
Yeah.
the solution you're selling,
Isn't that
that
interesting?
that is the mode. And the
Yes.
funny thing is, if you just think about it, that has always been the case, right? Like,
Yes.
people want to buy a solution to their problem. They don't want to buy code. They don't want to buy software. They
Yeah,
want
they
a
really don't want the
solution.
software. They want the
They don't care
answer. They
about
want it
software.
done. Yeah.
Ideally, in some cases, they wouldn't even get software. They would just have
Right.
someone who fixes their problem. It comes in
Right.
every day, right? But so we see the underlying things haven't really changed, but we've been, without face, being pressed into the facts, I guess.
Yeah.
What we see now also in those events, that all of a sudden the companies with professional services, sometimes up to, let's say, 50%, sometimes even tech-enabled companies that you just sell the solution and they
Yes.
use their internal, they are now the hot topic, right? Because
Yes.
they have the obvious mode.
Right. Yeah, tech-enabled solution. You can't, with this human in the loop, with some technology to do the thing over and over again, and it's scalable, it's SaaS-like revenues, but
And the TAM
it's
gets
just not all
bigger.
code. Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
I've been having this conversation a lot, and I don't want to make today too abstract, but
Yeah.
I've had a lot of conversation recently with small startups that were looking to sell a SaaS solution with let's take taxation, right? Like, how much is a home worth, right?
Yeah.
There's a certain amount of those reports being made every single year, right? And if you are a SaaS company enabling those companies, you first take the TAM of that original market, right? Like, how many are
Yeah.
the total taxation reports worth? Let's say it's 50 million in the Netherlands. Now you
Okay.
want to be the SaaS company that enables all those. So even if you get all of those companies, it's probably like less than 5 million you can even generate probably
Right.
even let's say in the scale of 2. But if you were to build a tech-enabled company that actually sells the taxation reports, your total addressable market is 50 million. And the funny thing here is you don't have to go down in price. You can be the company that gives the taxation reports instead of in 4 weeks. You can build them in 2 days. So you can even charge a premium because a lot of companies care
Yeah, of
about
course.
those,
Yeah,
right? So
right.
your time actually might go up if you have the whole market just because you are now so much more competitive. So it's
Well,
an
we see a
interesting
lot
way
of
of
that
looking
in
at it.
the old SaaS pricing, which is generally user-based. Number of users, good, better, best editions, right? That's
Yeah,
generally what's everybody's agreed on as a foundation. There's all kinds of variations of that, but that's enabling humans to do human things better, right?
yeah,
Faster, stronger. 7% of total spend of, expenses and IT spend, so forth. That's been the software as we help humans do things a little better. CRM, everything else.
yeah,
Now we have AI that does and agents that do the work. And you need fewer people or you can do more work, right? That humans would never do, all that
yeah,
stuff. And we're already seeing examples in Practical Founders groups that they can charge a lot more for doing the work. This is the arbitrage. You can hire another person, 50,000 euro a year,
yeah,
or you can hire 5,000 for the agent to do 90% of that. And you know, with great margins as well. So there's a there's a different value stack, but open up the TAM, all of that with agents. And one of us, a European company on the continent that is doing this with agents. It's not just the US guys getting it first. Let's talk about the AI game here, all AI, hybrid shifts, and other things like that. Are software companies moving as fast with AI experiments, AI products, AI agents doing work?
it's of course a difficult one because people come to us when they acknowledge they have a problem, and by definition, that means
Ah, okay,
like
there we go.
my bubble is automatically one that is one step further than I think a lot of companies, right?
Yeah, uh-huh.
Sure, when I do go to events, I will talk to people outside that bubble, but in my opinion, when I go to let's say SaaS US versus SaaS Europe, they're at the same stage. They
Okay.
all
Yeah,
have AI solutions.
yeah,
I'd say the core difference is that I see more US companies take the entrepreneurial mindset where like, hey, we are again starting another startup. This is a
yeah,
new thing. We have to eventually validate it, etc. Whereas and it, this is not for everyone, but I do see that the difference if I take the whole group and generalize that in Europe, they sometimes assume if we just build it, our customers will appreciate that as well, right? They
yeah,
don't see it as a second startup that has to be validated all over again. And don't get me wrong, some AI solutions are just improving what you're already doing, but a lot of AI solutions or add-ons, etc., they solve a new problem,
yeah, it's a new thing.
and you have to
Yeah,
start validating that. And I do see in the US they do take a more entrepreneurial mindset there. Other than that, I see every single SaaS company in the Netherlands I talk to at least have some kind of version of an AI product.
yeah,
But I'm always afraid like hey, you might be eating your margins if you don't think about it from an entrepreneurial perspective where hey, we have to validate if someone is willing to pay for this.
yeah. I just had Eric Ries on the podcast last week,
Cool.
the
Yeah.
lean startup guy,
The
and
OG, yeah.
doing, gave us a better framework. I think most people were doing this, a better framework for thinking about making smaller experiments and stepping back from the
Yeah.
hypothesis that we're all attached to. Of course, it'll work, and all of that. So now he's got a new book. He's moved on from that into the new world here. What can we say about AI pricing these days? So we can assume that everybody you're talking to, everybody listening to the podcast, everybody in the peer groups, they got some AI factor in their business.
Yeah.
AI helping them code faster, run their business better. AI adding value to their existing
Yeah.
product in some way, and AI products that, let's say, are more agentic, that do stuff, do more magic, do more work kind of thing. What can you say about where we are right now with AI for software companies?
Ooh, that's a tough one. So, in terms of pricing, the fundamental question hasn't changed, right? So you have to figure out, okay, what's the business case here? And I want to charge a percentage of that. And
Yeah.
I do think what's funny is that a lot of AI solutions will take some of the work. So if you can go usage-based or outcome-based,
Mhm.
what you are doing for the user is you're de-risking that. So when I do charge
Yes.
seat-based, what I'm
Yeah.
saying is every user pays the same regardless of how much they use it, right? And by definition, that feels more unfair than I'm paying for usage. So
Right.
the nice thing is that you're de-risking it. So if you essentially solve the same problem as a seat-based solution, you should be able to charge somewhat more because the customer says, I don't pay for users that don't really use it, right? That's kind of the idea there. You're supposed to take a bigger percentage. I think that's the nice part.
So literally what you're saying, and now this is all general and it depends on the market and everybody, but like you're saying, if you move to this more variable outcome, usage-based pricing, not just core seats, stable seats, it gives the customer more confidence that they're not overpaying. They're not going to overpay, right? We use less, where pricing will go down. We use more, pricing will go up. But in that, you should be able to capture more value in that equation. Not it's because
Yeah,
many founders would say usage-based. What if they use less, right? But you
that's
should
the
out of
risk,
chase.
yes.
How about they use 3 times more?
Yeah. So it's funny because this is the biggest change I'd say from SaaS, and we always had a fair usage clause
Yeah,
for like how much data you store,
yeah,
but the cost. I mean, that there's always edge cases, but the
yeah.
cost even of your worst customers in terms of storage wasn't that dramatic usually. But your most expensive customer with AI can bankrupt you in some cases, right?
Yeah, if you
So
have expensive
yeah.
tokens and, inference, yeah.
So the on the one hand with usage based, outcome based, but even in seed based, sometimes if you do it right, now if you can de-risk it and charge more for the same solution, but you have to really cover yeah. So you have to cover yourself. Like in the contract, have fair usage, have limits in place on multiple places where you say, if you exceed this usage, if you exceed this and that, we have to have a conversation on how, like what's next, right? Because it will get too expensive. I personally still think you can have AI in seed based. I think you can have AI in fixed fees, etc. But it's
Mhm.
becoming super important that you have a cap somewhere, and that you cannot just put it. Well, you can put it in the terms and conditions, but you better make sure
Yeah,
that someone read those terms and conditions because you want to manage expectations. It's not a conversation you want to have. Hey, here on page 365, we actually said there was a limit to that usage.
yeah,
So I think it has to be more prominent. And
yeah.
like you definitely have to invest some time in, okay, what is actually fair usage? What can I expect from my users?
Well, and the fact that all the big LLMs, are using that model, and we can see it visibly. Almost the headline news is they're changing pricing for this to capture
Yeah,
more or be more efficient or not allow unlimited API use and so forth. They're, teaching the market
yeah.
how this works, and, that's pretty cool. So, what else is there around AI that you can say generally, that's kind of interesting? We see a lot of hybrid, that there's a base price and a variable price. Is that where things will generally land?
That's so funny because we apply hybrid pricing to most of our SaaS customers actually, and we were doing that way before the AI companies
Oh,
were actually getting better. I personally think in so many cases when the contract size is, let's say, beyond 5K,
yeah.
so it's
A
not just
year?
per year. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's not just a credit card transaction. There's multiple. There's actually a conversation about pricing before you buy it, and
Mhm.
there's an invoice, etc. Then having a fixed fee with a variable is almost always in your interest as a seller. The example I like to take is like, let's go to an attraction park, like a attraction park, right? Like a
Yeah.
theme park. If I were to spend just $50 to get in, now I'm incentivized to go as many rides as I want, and every ride basically gets cheaper for me. If I were to go into the theme park without paying a fee, but I just pay, let's say, $5 per attraction, every time I go in one, I'm thinking, is it worth the money, right? I'm going to be very conscious about it. If I paid $50 to get in and pay $5 per ride, it's a balance because I already paid, I already have skin in the game. I kind of want to get my money out. Right? Like, so the average price per attraction gets lower, right?
It goes down, the more you
So,
use it. Yeah,
yes,
right.
so I no longer need a volume discount in this equation, which every SaaS company is doing on seats. because I'm
Right.
all, like the average price is already going down. Of course, people can calculate, etc. But you would be surprised how effective this already is in SaaS pricing, but also in AI pricing. And the nice thing here is the skin in the game part. So when we just started with
Mm-hmm.
AI, I saw just usage based and not even implementation fees, I knew this was gonna go bad. Why?
Yeah.
Because there's no switching cost. I can go to the next solution and
Yeah.
just try that. Most companies have they have a subscription with every single provider of AI. It's slowly changing, but that's the way it started. If I'm having to pay, let's say, 10K in platform fee and then additional usage fee, I now have skin in the game. I'm going to make sure we implement it, but because we invested in this, we also cannot just go to the competitor, right? And at the same time, for like the average price of a transaction or whatever like activity I'm doing is going down. So this hybrid pricing, just from a psychological perspective, is not just for AI companies, it's also for SaaS
Yeah.
companies
I
in
get it.
99% of the cases better, as long as the contract size is big enough where you have a conversation before someone buys, because otherwise it might get too complicated, right?
Right.
If you have to swipe a credit card and it
Yeah.
works this way.
And if there's something transactionally measurable that people can associate with their internal value,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. So that's interesting. For years, private equity post COVID, or actually with COVID, those hybrid models, we had some transaction, a marketplace, credit card fees, usage, variable usage transactions. And then COVID happened and it all went flat. And then everybody got to the other side. PE and venture capital said, no more of that. It's good. The more of your recurring revenue. And they'll barely talk about reoccurring revenue, that consistent transaction volume.
Yeah.
Do you see? So you're seeing this change because of AI and models, pricing models coming into play.
In terms of whether the private equity expects recurring revenue or.
Yeah, or it used to be their simple answer was, if you have transactions, we're going to totally discount that, regardless if it's pretty consistent. I don't know. Do they mind transaction revenue these days?
Yes and no. Stability is always worth something, right? It's
Yes.
worth a premium. I don't
It's
think that
worth a
will.
premium to founders as well.
Yes,
So yes.
exactly. I don't think that will change. That's predictability, stability is always worth something. However, this reoccurring part, right? The transactions, the not general recurring but reoccurring, is becoming normalized, and at the same time, we start saying it in the same breath, right? I think Google with their AdWorks, right? The way the whole they sell ads, they've always been talking about recurring revenue. It
Yeah.
depends on the story you tell, etc. But I see it all like reoccurring revenue is more like recurring revenue than it is like transactional, right? One-offs,
Yeah.
and that's how it's being treated. I don't see there's a massive change in private equity. I think
Okay.
usually they've seen that, but they are embracing it more than a couple of years ago, for sure.
What kinds of things are you seeing in pricing for agents, for software that does work, that receives calls or does the analysis, right? Things that people used to do.
Yeah.
I see different models there based on what the headcount used to do and, some arbitrage in there and other kinds of things. What are you seeing for that agentic software as labor
Yeah.
pricing?
It's funny that there's a psychological principle I think we all acknowledge where if someone tells me it's automation, I expect to pay, let's say, 10% of what a human would cost for the same
Yeah.
problem. If someone
Mhm.
says I automated it, then I refuse to pay as much for automation as a human
Like
worker doing the
software
same work.
process stuff that just does it. Yes.
Exactly. So if you say, I'm just going to automate this process as an AI company, you are screwing yourself out of money by doing that. And don't get me wrong, I don't think every company can do it the other way, which I'm about to say. In some
Yeah.
cases, that's the only way to do it. But the biggest winners in the agentic space are the ones who will tell a story from a position perspective. The whole marketing and sales story is, we are building an assistant, like essentially almost a human, right? Someone that sits in your organization that's gonna do the full job. If you do that very well, you can actually take, let's say, 50 to 75% of someone's salary for that
Uh-huh.
agent. But
Uh-huh.
it doesn't stand and fall with the pricing. It is the whole positioning from start to finish. The
Right.
moment someone sees something about your company, you have to position it as an assistant, right? As an entity.
As a staff member. Yeah.
as a staff member. And if you do that
Yeah.
correctly, then you can charge a premium. But I've seen a lot of companies try that and execute that, but then half-heartedly, right? They don't do it as like full on in the marketing and the way they talk about it, and then they will fail. They will always fail. But if you do it correctly, and again, not everyone can get away with it, those are the biggest winners.
I've seen different versions of this. One is it's metaphor. It's something we can look at. You had 20 people doing SDR work.
Yeah.
Now you can have 5 people do SDR work, and we do 90% of all this other thing, and it runs 24/7 and all the rest of that. And you could buy our agentic labor units as part-time and full-time
Yeah.
agents, that kind of thing.
There you
So
go.
it follows the metaphor. We'll see where all of our minds change, where this goes.
It's
You
still
know,
an
the whole
experimental phase, right? So we might find
Yeah.
out that people will see through it. But right now, I've seen multiple winners. And exactly like you say, right? The part-time, full-time, it doesn't make any rational sense, right? Because it's still a tool. And at the same time, it's working. So it's fascinating to me.
Yeah, that's part of the pricing puzzle. There's the rational side, the
Yes.
spreadsheet side, and then there's the what will work in real life.
Which is way more important than the
Yeah,
spreadsheet
which is
side.
way more important. So what mistakes do you I mean, there's all kinds of mistakes SaaS founders make with SaaS pricing, not changing their pricing, procrastinating it, and so forth. What mistakes are you seeing with AI experiments, new features, new products,
Yeah.
new companies?
Um, a series. So one is we always like to categorize based on, is it internal savings you're talking about here, right? Is it automation internally? Is it your win? Is it you offering a better solution, right? The same problem, but more effective, faster, etc. Or are you solving a different problem altogether? And I see too often that people don't start by asking that question, and sometimes they try and actually increase prices based on internal cost savings, time saving, etc. That doesn't make sense, and like usually causes friction. Then you have the ones that actually it's just an optimization of the existing solution. So the best thing you can do is probably increase the prices of that solution, but they try to sell it as an add-on. That also doesn't make sense. Add-ons are usually better for a solution to a new problem outside the original theory already solved. So
Yeah.
just by categorizing that more effectively, right, and thinking about that, I will see less mistakes, fewer mistakes, because people will have a bigger success rate selling it, right?
Hmm.
I think that's one major thing. The other is expectation management. Like I said previously, with a fair usage clause and like limits, they will create, they will label as beta, right? They're testing it, but they say that once and never again, and the customer forgets about it being a temporary feature or their limits, and there still needs to be a price. And they take 6 months to actually figure out what it should cost. And by that time, the customer came to expect that as their solution. They're now
Right.
entitled to it, and you're now charging a price that's not fair, right?
No.
So that constant iteration, like this is something we're testing with you right now. This is what we think it will probably cost in the future, right? Like it's good to already say it's going to cost something. We might go up, might go down. Expectation management. If you
Yeah.
do that better, you will not run into as much entitlement that you're creating, and at the same time, you also don't risk killing your margins by like having a major AI bill. I personally see that that's, by the way, the biggest killer. Companies that are now testing their AI, running up cost, and no clear path to how to price it, and not even having asked like the customers, can we eventually charge you for this?
Against margins that are not the same as SaaS margins, right? You're using a lot of tokens and
Even
so
just in general, can we charge you for
okay,
it?
all right, yeah.
But definitely, like, can we charge you at the right margins? But then also, in some cases, you've never done usage based, and you might be in let's say you're in construction, right? A lot of, and I cannot speak about the construction in the US, but at least in Europe, a lot of construction companies are behind many other in terms of maturity of procurement. Sometimes they even want fixed fees. Even seat based can be too much to ask in construction
Right.
sometimes.
Okay.
And now you want to introduce usage based because you've implemented AI and you've never actually figured out if the market is ready for that. So you will have to fit in a fixed fee or seat based in an AI space where it's not going to work, right? So like just thinking about pricing early on, and I'm not just selling our services here, but
Yeah.
I think people are not thinking about pricing early on enough when they come from a SaaS background. I do
Yeah.
see a lot of AI companies already figuring out, hey, we're building up the bill every month, so we have to experiment faster.
Excellent. Yeah, the margins are less of a surprise to the AI first
Exactly.
there. And we talked about starting up and growing up and the stages of SaaS companies. Well, let's just call them 1 million, 5 million,
Yeah.
10 million. Different versions of product market fit and maturity and product value and understanding and process and run over discipline and internal structure, all that stuff that
Yeah.
companies go through between 1 and 10. Do founders have to think differently? Do you think differently about those stages? They're very different stages. Of 1 million, the messy, we just finally got up here and we're looking at
Yeah.
what's going on. We've run some experiments. 10 million, the factory's running, you know, we've narrowed in all of that. But like, how is pricing and packaging thinking different at 1 and 5 and 10 million? Or are they about the same?
Yeah. From our perspective, like when you change the prices, there's a lot of similarity. It's not much different, but the legacy is tremendously different at every stage. So,
Okay.
for example, if we go to a company doing 1 million, every deal will probably look different than the other, right?
They know
Um,
they're still making it up. Yeah.
they're still
Mhm.
making it up. At that point, they have product market fit, of they just found it or about to find it, right? A lot of experimentation, right? And the founder owns it. And the
Yes.
funny thing is, the founder will take multiple sessions with us to explain what he or she has done, because it is a sensible story in his or her head. But actually, when you look at like what it is, right? If it's a scalable strategy, it's usually not. It's every single time the founder look for, okay, how big is this opportunity? Which, by the way, that's a very healthy attitude, and I wish more
Yeah.
bigger companies would take it. But you need a more scalable manner of doing that. So what we usually see, everything's ad hoc, and there's no integrated strategy. Then when we get to 5 million, the funny thing is, usually no one owns it anymore, because the founder is now
Oh.
focused on different things. Like the product
A lot
has
more
an
stakeholders in pricing now. Yeah.
exactly, like you now have product, you have sales, depending on, of course, contract size. You have marketing that has an opinion about it. The CFO sometimes might want to have something to say about it. But the funny thing is, like, no one owns it yet. And
Yeah.
of course, companies differ, and we sometimes see there's an owner, but around 5 million, that's usually in this no man's land. And then when you get to 10 or 20 million, someone took ownership. But then the funny thing is, it's silos again. So let's say product takes ownership, but they're not listening to sales as much anymore. And they're trying to fit this box into every single deal, while sales actually understands, hey, sometimes this customers, even though they look the same, this one will get a lot more value. So can we not just either increase the price or do something else? And the other way around is also true, right? But sales owns it. Now product has to build a new functionality every month, right?
Right.
So one thing is ownership that really differs by stage, but it's predictable.
Yeah.
So if I can give one advice, keep the mentality of the founder owning
Yes.
pricing, but make sure someone else is appointed, or maybe even get a counsel. I think that's the best thing you can do. Have one person that owns it, but have a counsel. Make sure the product, finances, and sales are all included in that conversation.
Well,
And,
that's
yeah,
interesting. Yeah. There's a version of ad hoc at plus 5 million where sales leader says, we're going to do this, right? Or something like that. So that's really interesting. What level would you rather come in? I guess there's pluses and minuses. The early stage, there's more flexibility. You can move things around, but they probably have less data,
yeah,
right? And that. And the later stage, there's more alignment and complexity there, but there's a higher value to solving the problem, right?
yeah.
The pricing problem. What, you don't know. Do you have a preference for the kinds of companies you work with, or I know
I
you work
think you
with all of
already,
them?
yeah, I think you already nailed it. Like everyone has its like advantages
Yeah.
and disadvantages. I personally, from a puzzle perspective, I really like the ones that are just starting out, even be like below 1 million, just because
Yeah.
there's nothing yet. And it is such an intellectual exercise, like validation and just testing things
Yeah.
out. And what's the business case? And usually the founder doesn't even know what he or she is selling yet.
Yeah.
It's super interesting, but
Yeah.
you couldn't build a business of that. And at the
Yeah.
same time, what we see then is sometimes we fix the, like we help them with the pricing, but the company itself doesn't have a solid solution yet, so we get nowhere, right?
Yeah.
So in terms of like one scaling Refixer, my company, right? And the other in just companies with right size of impact and timeline. I'd say 3 to 5 million is the sweet spot, because
Yeah,
usually it's the founder or CEO that really still owns everything. We don't have to go through too many hurdles, right? There's no politics yet. And at the same time, let's take 5 million. We've never been below 20% ARR growth after a project. So that means 5 million within the
it's a million.
first 1 to 2 years, right? We already add 20%, let's say another million just by doing pricing. And in some cases, we go way beyond. Or what also happens usually between 3 and 5, we usually help the companies go up market.
Yeah.
So that's when they
Yes.
have enough customers to see that the actual ICP are just like 3 customers in their whole pool
Yes.
that are the future. And we really like taking them through that exercise.
I hear that a lot. It's pretty common. You can almost predict it, right? We started with the little guys and then they're
Yes.
not great customers. They don't have somebody dedicated to do the thing we want and the skin in the game and
Yes.
the ROI
But you
and the
needed
value.
those because the bigger ones wouldn't have
Yeah, of
bought until,
course.
yes.
Right. You can kind of predict it. Let's talk about how you work with companies. What is a typical kind of engagement and maybe even your pricing and,
Yeah.
the value?
We always like to take the anecdotal or the analogy that we are a doctor. So you come to us, and even free of charge, right before we start anything, we'll do a diagnosis, see where the opportunities are, and then figure out how to work together. Usually, it comes in 2 flavors, or we set up a project where we change the whole pricing, or you have a very large tender, right, a very large deal, an RFP, whatnot, that you want us to help on that specific case. And then we usually take skin in the game in that deal, right? Where maybe some investment initially, but then we say,
Interesting.
okay, if we actually land the customer, then you pay us X amount. So that's very interesting, because we're on top of the money, and then you also have very little risk, right? That if it goes
Yeah.
bad, well, you barely have to pay us. And the other the way is we do a project which we usually start with anywhere between 1 to 4 months. It's about a month to get to the first new packaging. And by the way, we always start with packaging. Pricing is the very last thing,
Interesting.
because it changes per client. But then we do take out 3 months, always included, for validation.
Yeah.
And usually that first half is even before we have the packaging, but then we already start testing like the basic stuff. Like, can we do something with the SLA, right? Can we introduce maybe a platform fee, or maybe we fix the volume discount, because we see that in so many cases it's already like always messed up. So we try some general best practices. We validate that with a couple deals. Then we include that in the packaging we're building. And then in the second half, we start actually testing the new strategy with a few customers. And then you can choose to extend that validation support for the coming months. Or you say, no, I want to take the strategy you've given us and test it with just a handful of customers, and I want to try it myself. So that's
Okay.
generally the way.
That would be pretty common, and I would expect, I mean, that's one of the things you can do better than founders and their teams making it up, which is the starting place, with good intuition, you're right, and gut feel, or and a little data and all that, or asking ChatGPT or listening to other pricing, reading a pricing book. You come in with all of your expertise, look at their context, and you can help them seize things and put it in the right validation so you can test some things that they might feel uncomfortable with and validate it to get confidence,
Yeah.
right? I and move quickly. I've never heard of somebody in pricing saying, "You have a big RFP, we can help you. I know we can help you do better with that," is a way to, get the ball rolling. I love that.
We prefer it that way, or in the sense, I don't have a glass ball. My co-founder doesn't have a glass. Like, we cannot look into the future. We're not.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but what we can do, and that's I think where we are different than the competition out there, is I didn't come out of university, go to a management consultant, learn
Yes.
the theory behind it. No, I've always sold software for the first time to the first couple customers, and I've learned that every single customer is different, and that the money is in the structure, not in the pricing, and the story you tell around
Oh.
that. So the funny thing is, if I tell you you have to pay double tomorrow for the exact same solution, that's going to cause a lot of friction. If I now come up with a whole new structure and it seems like you're paying double but for new things, then I might get away with it. So there's a lot of philosophy, and I think you need sales experience, actual on the ground experience as a founder, or being the next person to the founder, to
Yeah.
understand how to validate these things, and then go from there. I don't think I don't think we can ever truly predict the right pricing strategy on day one. We need to see how the customer interacts, and we need to train you on that story. We cannot just say, hey, here's the pricing, good luck. No, we tell you, okay, this is
You
the
have to
story you tell.
rewire a lot of
Yes,
things in the business. The
pricing
founder,
is
the sales pitch,
positioning.
the whole thing.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, that's right. Pricing is positioning.
Yeah.
Yes. And I totally see that when companies go up market, right? They're all of a sudden 50% of their revenue is the up market, and they haven't bifurcated their pricing, right? Or left the other ones behind, right?
You know
Something
what's
like
the
that.
worst thing they do? And I see this every time. They create a volume discount. When they get to like the first 1 or 2 million ARR, they have a volume discount, and then they land a customer that's 3 times as big. And then if you look at
The economics
the
suck, yeah.
matrix they made, right, or the initial list they have, they're now so far beyond that they start just extrapolating that original volume discount model, and all of a sudden they're discounting 50 to 80% for the big customer. That's what I see almost every time when people go up market. They're still in the mindset, and this is a gigantic
Ah,
customer, instead of resetting that mindset. Hey, this is our new normal customer, and
right.
there's going to be bigger ones.
Yeah, it's an old one. It's very interesting. It's not obvious and it's not intuitive, but Salesforce did this in the beginning, that if you're a little company, you paid $50 a user. If you're a bigger company, you paid $75 a user. If you're a really big company, you paid $125 a user, plus other things.
Yes.
So literally, being a big company with way more users paid the more. It was a reverse elasticity,
Yeah.
right? So, you know, is there a lot of elasticity? Last little techie question here. Is there a lot of elasticity in software? Meaning, if you raise your price too much, demand will go down. If you lower your, if you're low, you're going to capture more demand. Maybe maybe that's the big message here. There's a lot less elasticity. You probably could raise your prices and it won't change too much.
I got a question, Louis, today after
Yeah.
sharing a proposal with our customer, and they said, we kind of want to know what the elasticity is. I said, well, first of all, if you have a large deal size, it's impossible to do a proper research, right? But here's the thing: if you rarely get friction on pricing, if it's rarely a barrier to entry, then it's probably not as bad, right? If not, at least 20% of your deals in the negotiation stage give you some kind of friction on pricing, then you're probably charging way too little. Let's say 40% is keeps giving you you pushback, then of course you might want to go down. But the customer will tell you. First, they look for, can you fix my problem, right? And if they
Yeah.
believe in that, then they want to have a quote. And
Yeah.
at that stage, they've already invested time, so they'll always also be honest about, are you simply too expensive and therefore I'm not buying your solution? Or is there a different reason? And you can
Yeah.
just straight up ask someone, right?
Yeah.
Like, why didn't you buy? And if they don't give the reason of price, then you probably don't have a pricing problem.
Yeah, that's right. Interesting. That's great. How can people get in touch with you? I'll have your links to your LinkedIn and a way to contact you on the page for this podcast. But can people call and say, I want to have a chat and engage? Maybe it leads to
Yeah.
engagement, maybe it doesn't. But what is your first way that you can engage with founders who say, that makes sense? I think I have a pricing opportunity.
Yeah, if you go to our website, refixer.com, and I think you can share the link, right? And
Yes.
there should be a button, get in touch in the top corner.
Yeah.
That one is actually linked directly to my calendar. So
Okay.
you can just schedule something with me directly, or if you want to actually read up on some of the playbooks first, there's my Substack, right? I try to share as much as I can. And then, of course, LinkedIn is always a great channel.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for sharing your knowledge on the Practical Founders podcast, TJ. Lastly, you've got I'm giving you the mic. You're in front of 1,000 practical founders out there. You've given us some wisdom today. Pricing is positioning, and if 20% of your customers are not complaining about pricing, you
Yeah.
could probably raise it. What one or two things can you add to the list here to give the gift of your knowledge to founders out there to improve
Yeah.
their situation? Pricing is so important and it's so complex.
The main thing I want to say is that your pricing isn't as fixed as you think it is.
Yeah.
So many people think, if I change my pricing, I have to do it for everyone. No. If you are in the B2B space, the one thing I will ask you to do tomorrow, or the very next deal quote you're making, just try something new. Try a platform fee. Try charging for your services, your onboarding. Try maybe something usage try just increasing your price, but like on the next quote you make, just try something new, see what the response is. And sure, like even if they reply negatively, like you should probably try it twice, but at least just once try something, and you will see that in 90% of the cases you don't get pushback. And then when you don't get that pushback after the first time, you will be super confident doing it the second time. And that's how
Yeah.
you train, just like any muscle, right? Like you have to do it once, it's very awkward. The second time is less awkward, and the third time is just all you know. So just tomorrow, try something else on your quote, and you will start seeing you're going to make a lot more money that way than you did before.
Well, that's a very practical approach. And stay off the funding, price and package your product appropriately for your ICP.
Yes.
That's really awesome. Thanks again, TJ, for being on the Practical Founders podcast.
Absolute pleasure, Greg. Thank you so much.
Thanks for watching this week's interview on the Practical Founders podcast. Be sure to like this episode and subscribe to the Practical Founders YouTube channel to keep up with my weekly in-depth interviews with serious software founders who are building valuable software companies without big funding. You can check out my blog, all the podcast episodes, and information about my Practical Founders CEO peer groups at practicalfounders.com, or message me on LinkedIn if you'd like to connect. See you next week.